KNES 560, graduate biomechanics. This is going to be a little short intro video um, to talk about kind of the topic of this week. And before we get into the nuts and the bolts of biomechanics, application of mechanical principles to biological systems, it's important to differentiate biomechanics from exercise physiology in that obviously we're all on the same team, we're working towards very similar goals, but biomechanics is macro mechanics. It's bigger observable things, and exercise phys is micro mechanics. It's the very small that you can't really see with your own eyes, right? And so although they were similar, the macro is the stuff that tends to be very applicable with people. In other words, I can talk with my father about his posture and proper ways of lifting things, right? Pop, man, don't use your back when you lift up. Oh, shit, I'm sorry, I forget. I'm going to try to do better next time, right? I can't really go to my dad and say, Pop, let's talk about those ryanodine receptors, man. So biomechanics tends to be a more universal language for coaches and trainers and therapists and laymen and women to talk because a lot of these things we all have in common. We just may understand it differently, or we can be able to help them, but we're all kind of swimming in the same pond. So the applicability of this stuff is very important. Another thing that's important is to understand that a lot of times we're talking about similar things, but we're using different verbiage. So that's what we have to kind of work towards, having students from different disciplines and different universities coming here. In undergrad, I could kind of say, this is Campbell's verbiage. This is how we say these things. This is how we communicate these things. And it's not to say I'm right or I'm wrong, but we all have to be on the same page about what we call things. I call a cat, but my mama, which is my grandmother, for those of you that are not from around here, called the cat a minou. And when I was a kid, my grandma was like, "Hey, Brian, go put some water for that minou." And I'm like, bruh, my grandma seeing some critters, I don't know. And then my mom was like, well, that's French for cat. In other words, we were both talking about the same thing, just what we called it was different. So a lot of times we have to remember that sometimes our disagreements or misunderstandings is just verbiage. The concepts are the same, but sometimes verbiage can kind of get in the way of communication and progress. Okay, so I have a picture of Shaq and Simone Biles up here. That's how we're going to start our journey. And what I want to emphasize here is the concept of a continuum. Continuums are cool, but bruh, continuums can make you get into a rabbit hole of deep thought. Everything is on some type of continuum. Colors, you think there's Roy G. Biv, bro, there's all kinds of crazy colors, combinations of this, infinitely many colors. The way I like to look at a continuum is with height. That's why I have these two. Simone Biles, the greatest gymnast of all time. Shaq, a NBA Hall of Famer. I like to view continuums as a height chart with like in human existence, the shortest person that's ever lived and the tallest person that's ever lived. And every person that's ever walked on this earth is somewhere in that continuum. And you say, well, Dr. Campbell, what if two people are the same height? And you say, well, they're only the same height because we may be limited in how we measure. We can zoom in and keep zooming and keep zooming and keep zooming until they are not the same height, until there's a differentiation. And that could be 0.01, 0.0001, 0.000001. You could keep adding point O's until there's a different number. It's like snowflakes, right? So every person that's ever lived has been on this continuum. And then all of a sudden, we're going to do what we do, what humans do, and that's categorize everything. We need to make two categories. We need to differentiate these billions of people on this height spectrum, this height continuum. And we need to put them into two groups. Two groups. We're gonna separate them from tall and short. We're gonna have a tall group, we're gonna have a short group. And if you say, all right, well, we've had 10 billion people, so let's split it right down the middle. When you split that into two groups, the two people you split, the person who's tall versus the person that is short group, is separated by 0.00000000001 micrometer, but yet one is tall and one is short. That's how I tend to reflect on the concept of a continuum. And continuums are really important because in mechanics, I mean, why are you learning this stuff? So that you could use it to help people, whether that's help people as a coach, whether it's to help someone as a personal trainer, whether it's to help someone as an eventual therapist, whether it's to help someone at the CrossFit gym, whether it's to help someone who's just a family member who needs some advice. We have to understand that there's no fixed recipe for everything. If all you do is walk around with a hammer, all your problems are going to have to be nails for it to work. We have to view biomechanics as kind of having this toolbox of a lot of different contraptions that we may have to customize to use for that one task, right? We have to mold on this continuum. Now, the payoff of understanding continuums is this. We are bound, humans in sport activity rehab, we are bound by certain laws of physics, right? Michael Jordan didn't defy physics. When he jumped really high, it's like, oh, Michael Jordan defying physics. Michael Jordan looked different than everyone else who would ever jump because dude jumped higher than everybody else. So his parabola looked different, right? If you're used to just seeing this and all of a sudden you see that, whoa, he just turned off gravity. And all right, dude was a genetic freak. So we're all bound by by universal laws of physics, specifically on this earth. But we are also bound by our personal morphology, our genetic limitations, our genetic potential. Where are we born on that continuum? For them, what's easy to see is height. Simone Biles couldn't train her way to being as tall as Shaq, and Shaq couldn't train his way to being as short as Simone. Things like fiber type, things like height, things like hand size, feet size, like it's rolling the dice, the genetic dice for all these things. And sometimes there are some mechanical anomalies. I'm going to tend to go mechanics and not physiology. So there's mechanical anomalies. Powerful, highly coordinated athlete who just so happened to get introduced to gymnastics and found she was really, really good at it. If she was that size, she would not be good at gymnastics. You see what I'm saying? Shaq, born with the genetic potential to be 7'1". He was going to be 7'1" no matter what. Bones can grow circumferentially with training, but longitudinally, you are genetically set. And the only way you're going to mess with that is if you severely malnourish yourself. Basketball came easy for Shaq. I'd be good too. Like, I imagine me in a Nerf hoop with my 10-year-old son just absolutely owning him and dunking on him. Dude, that's what Shaq was like growing up. They found what niche their body types and what they were specifically good at. This might sound shocking. I don't care. Have you ever heard about the one-legged wrestler? A kid lost his leg in an accident, and he went on to be a NCAA champion or state champion. Don't quote me on the NCAA. He was really good. And someone said, used it as a success story and a motivation story. You can do anything. This kid was a wrestling champ with one leg. And I started thinking, and I was like, out of all the things he could have done, why wrestling? Wrestling's on the ground. You don't really need two legs. And also, wrestling is based off of size difference, right? In other words, you wrestle within a weight class. So this kid basically was able to take the mass of one leg and redistribute it to his upper extremity, and he weighed the same as people who had less upper body mass. So in other words, when they got on the ground, this dude bash people's head and he was dominating everybody. Also, when people went to hook his legs, there was nothing there. They couldn't hook. So he also got to practice against two-legged wrestlers all the time. They never got to practice against one-legged wrestlers until they had to face them in the match. My point is that sometimes what looks like a disadvantage might actually be an advantage biomechanically, okay? You're bound by your morphology. You are bound by your genetic potential. What it does mean and what it doesn't mean. It doesn't mean you can't improve. If you were born with slow twitch fibers, that doesn't mean you can't get faster. What it means is, if here's our continuum, and here's Usain Bolt, now there's some biomechanical reasons he's super fast too, but he has fast twitch fibers. And you're Brian Campbell, I can't just say my prayers, eat my vitamins, and train my way to Usain Bolt. I can climb the ladder, but I have to have a reasonable expectation of my genetic capabilities and limits, okay? I think that's really important, especially for kids, when you're working with kids, right? I want to be this. Well, you could do anything you set your mind to. That kid may not have been born 7'1". Hey, we can improve. We can get better. We can improve ourselves in all these different facets, and you keep working hard and let's see what happens. Unrealistic expectations can be a problem, especially with kids when you tell them anybody could throw. I had this happen to me when I was a kid. I had a coach tell me anyone could throw 90 miles an hour. It's all in the mechanics. I'm like, well, I want to be a pro pitcher one day. Well, now I realize I didn't have the genetic mechanics to externally rotate my shoulder like major league pitchers. But in my head, I was like, well, I'm just not doing it right. Can you imagine how frustrating that'd be if you think it's always your fault because someone told you you could do it if you just did it right? I have a lot of examples of that too. Shooting free throws, I always had my elbow out. And my high school coach was very big on form, right? And he's screaming at me, he's like, Brian, keep your elbow in proper form. And I'm like, I'm trying. We'll kind of find out I'm just very tight. And I didn't have the external rotation needed to reposition my elbow in. Well, if he would have understood basic mechanics and said, well, maybe Brian keeps his elbow out, not because he's just not listening to me, not because he's not trying. Maybe there's a reason he can't tuck his elbow in. Hey, athletic trainer, let's do a range of motion assessment on him, see if there's anything going on. Same thing happened with me. I'm just a tight person. I'm a snare drum. When I would pitch as a kid, my foot was supposed to point a certain way, but when I would rotate over, my foot would flare out. So again, coaches, right? Coaches know your foot's supposed to be here. They check the cookbook. Foot's supposed to be here. Brian, keep your foot pointing here. That's what the book says. I'm like, Coach, I'm trying. I'm trying every time. Flare out, flare out. Well, then I'm not a good learner, right? Because I'm not listening to my coach. I'm not a good team player because I'm not doing what coaches asked me to do. Instead of saying, well, dang, Brian, we've been trying to work on this for 2 weeks and your foot keeps flaring out. Maybe there's a reason your foot's flaring out. Maybe it's not that you're not listening. Maybe it's not that you're not trying. Maybe there's something going on that's not allowing your motion to do what we're trying to get you to do. Hey, athletic trainer. Hey, doctor, come check out. Whoa, he has really, really tight hips, coach. When he goes to rotate, he runs out of range of motion very soon, and everything's going along for the ride. If we work on his flexibility, then he may be able to do what you're asking him to do. Okay? I'm going to show you a couple more examples of this concept. It's very important that we talk about the whys, right? Why are we learning the things we're learning? So check this out. When I was at Auburn, we used to do these swim videos to raise money for the lab. Auburn at the time had one of the top college swim programs in the country. Our swim coach back then, back in my day, is now the U.S. Olympic swim coach, okay? David Marsh. We had Olympians all over the place, from all over the world that swam at Auburn. These cats were good, built like dolphins, incredible form and mechanics. I really felt bad. We used to video the kids. We had an underwater track camera, and we would film these kids that would come to the swim camp. And I mean, dude, these kids swam like me. I mean, just right. Some of them are really good, but you get what I'm saying. And then we would use software that would compare. Imagine being a kid and saying, hey, kid, this is you, and this is what you should look like. We would compare the kids to the Olympians, not the high school, not the Olympians, and say, here's you, here's them, and we would sync their form together, and we would use that as a teaching tool. It's awful. Because again, imagine a kid saying, I'm trying to do that. Is that realistic? If I try really hard, will I be able to get to where they're at? I was always taught if I could do anything if I set my mind to it, and it just takes hours of work, right? I just need to work harder. I'm here, they way over here. I just need to work harder. Instead of saying, listen, little Cindy Lou Who, listen, little Billy, we can make you the best swimmer you can be. And we can do that a number of ways. And the best that you can be is having ultimate victory of your morphology, right? That's all you can do is be the best you can be. But setting unrealistic expectations, to me, defeats the purpose of the sport, of the activity, of trying to do your best. Okay, so we would sync video like this with videos like this, and like, all right, you see what that person's doing, do that. It's not fair. Here's another example. Right, football. Why are quarterbacks tall? Right? Well, if you polled most coaches, because they can see over the line and they can see everything. And the biomechanist says, well, because typically we are very proportional. In fact, if you put your arms out, your tip of your fingers is roughly your height. We have small people tend to have small hands. Big people tend to have big hands. When you're throwing a football, you need to create friction on the ball. Friction is compression. And what are the two surfaces made of? Having big hands is great for producing friction on the ball. If you give me a Nerf ball, I could throw the ball like Joe Montana. Not really. But if you give me a big NFL football, I have to change my mechanics or the ball is going to slip out of my hand because I don't have huge hands. Okay? Peyton Manning is 6'5". Peyton Manning has 6'5" hands. Now again, you're born with genetic anomalies. Sometimes we all have mutations some kind of way. And some of these anomalies manifest themselves with shorter people being born with big hands. So here's a picture of a kid in high school. Typically, quarterbacks are the best athlete on the field. But notice how he's in this cocking phase, and the ball is up here, right? Kind of on his palm. I'm venturing to say that that kid probably doesn't have huge hands because that's normal. Smaller people, small hands. When I was in high school, our quarterback was 5'7". But yet, when I came back here to teach, the coach said, Brian, we have some video we want you to help us with our quarterback. The quarterback was shorter than 5'7" at the time. And they were showing this kid video of Peyton Manning throwing the ball. And then they showed me video of him throwing the ball. And he's like, we're trying to get him to do this. And I'm like, Coach, Peyton Manning's 6'5". Our quarterback is 5'5". And he has 5'5" hands. If he would do what Peyton Manning's doing, the ball would slip out of his hand. Okay? Now, a quarterback like Drew Brees, who's relatively short for the NFL, has huge hands. He hit the genetic lottery with hands. I shook his hand one time. It was like meeting Sasquatch from the Jack Link's beef jerky videos. So look how in that cocking phase, similar phase to this kid, but look how that kid is going to hold it in his palm in order to keep the ball from slipping out. Whereas Drew, who can generate friction enough, he can be more in a mechanically advantaged position. It has nothing to do with form. It has everything to do with you having the mechanics and the body morphology to do what they're asking you to do. Okay? Who's some other short quarterbacks? Russell Wilson, Johnny Manziel was a famous short quarterback. Look at what these cats were born with. Russell Wilson, short Russell Wilson, had the biggest hands at the NFL Combine when he came out. He has huge hands. He has the hands of someone who's 6'6". So again, the point of what I'm trying to get you to see is sometimes when you're asking people to do, like let's say you're working with someone on their form, whether it's in the gym, it's CrossFit, whatever, and they're having a tough time doing what you're asking them to do, maybe there's a reason. Maybe there's some limits. Maybe there's some motion issues. Maybe there's some muscle weakness someplace, right? You got to sometimes ask yourself, well, maybe there's something there why you can't do what I'm asking you to do outside of just you need more practice. There's nothing more frustrating to someone than to say you just need to practice more when they have practiced their butts off and they still can't do it. You're bound by your morphology, okay? So we have to understand that. There's Johnny Manziel with his size 15 shoe. Big hands, big feet. All right. So what I'm going to do is, so this is I wanted to introduce you to the concept of morphology and the concept of genetic limitations and the concept of sport-specific bodies. And I'm going to send you a couple videos to watch from TED Talk. And I'm also, and I want you to watch the videos with an open mind. And I want you to watch the videos and relate the information into your focus area, into your area of interest. And then I want you to tell me some stuff about it. I'm going to send you what I want to know. Guys, this is just conversation. This is just conversation. I want you to think outside the box. I want you to use your brains. It doesn't have to be what's 4 + 4. It could just be brainstorming and thinking and applying and just really delving into this interest area. Because like I said, the application of this can be with and for anyone. You can help someone with their form, their posture, their mechanics. It could literally be anyone you meet on the street you can talk biomechanics with, okay? Not like in nerdy Newton way, but just layman's terms. Biomechanics is a universal layman's language, okay? All right, so there's just a little brief intro, and I'm going to send you the videos to watch, and I'm going to send you the assignments. And those assignments are not due until the next week, okay? All right, guys, be well.